My name is Naomi Carter, and the day my father was lowered into the ground, my half-sister looked me in the eye and said, "You have no place here." The choir hadn't even finished the hymn. My hands were still trembling from holding the folded eulogy I never got to read. She smiled while saying it. That polished kind of smile rich women learn young, the one that hides cruelty behind grace. I didn't respond. I just stood there, the cold wind pressing the black veil against my face, pretending her words didn't break something deep inside me. Because that's what I've always done. Pretend, endure, stay quiet until silence becomes armor. But that was before the letter. Before I found out that my father's last words weren't buried with him. They were waiting for me, sealed in an envelope, with my name written in his handwriting. And what that letter revealed didn't just change how I saw my family, it changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and legacy. Before we move on, I need to be honest with you. My heart sank when I saw that 99% of you watch my videos but don't subscribe. It truly means the world when you do. It helps stories like this find the people who need them. So please, take a second to subscribe. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing your locations. It reminds me that stories really do connect us, no matter where we are. My name is Naomi Carter, and if I could describe that morning in one word, it would be hollow. The church smelled of lilies and rain, sweet, suffocating, like grief trying too hard to be pretty. My father's casket sat in the center aisle, polished until it reflected the ceiling lights like still water. Everyone around me seemed to know exactly where to stand, what to whisper, how to cry just enough. I stood at the back, clutching the folded eulogy I had written and rewritten through sleepless nights, waiting for a nod that never came. Elise, my half-sister, wore black like it was couture. Her veil matched her lipstick, her tears choreographed to the cameras of our father's colleagues. She looked up at the choir loft and smiled that faint, practiced smile that once melted investors. When her eyes found me, the smile froze, then sharpened. "You have no place here," she said. Not a whisper, not rage. Just a fact delivered like weather, inevitable, cold, unchangeable. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't here for her permission. That I had loved the man she called father, long before she learned to spell his name for magazine interviews. But the words stayed behind my teeth. Instead, I nodded as if agreeing with her. Sometimes dignity sounds like silence. The hymn resumed. I sat near the aisle, the wood of the pew pressing into my spine, every note from the organ trembling through me. Outside, thunder rolled over the cemetery hill. The pastor spoke of legacy, of generosity, of forgiveness. None of those words fit the man I knew. My father was brilliant but afraid of the noise love makes when it's honest. I watched Elise dab her eyes with lace while the crowd murmured sympathy. I felt invisible, and somehow that invisibility became armor. I thought, let them believe what they want. The truth doesn't need witnesses. It only needs time. When the service ended, umbrellas opened like dark flowers. People kissed Elise's cheek, avoided my gaze, and spoke in tones reserved for unwanted guests. The rain came harder. I stayed behind as the casket was lowered, watching mud cling to the polished mahogany like guilt that wouldn't wash away. My hands were shaking, not from cold but from restraint. That's when I felt a touch on my shoulder. A man in a charcoal coat, older, solemn, carrying a small envelope. "Miss Carter?" he asked. His voice carried the same weight as the rain, heavy but certain. I nodded. He handed me the envelope. Cream paper. My name written in my father's handwriting, looped, deliberate, unmistakable. "He asked me to give this to you after the burial," the man said. Elise glanced over from the crowd, her expression tightening like a string pulled too far. I slipped the letter into my coat pocket before she could speak. She didn't need to see it. Not yet. As the hearse doors closed, I felt the first real pulse of warmth that day. Not comfort, not love. Something sharper. Anticipation. Whatever my father had left unsaid, it was mine now. And for the first time in years, I felt the ground shift beneath the weight of my own name. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain against the blinds, softer now, like it was tired from weeping. The house was silent. My black dress still hung on the chair, half folded, half forgotten, carrying the scent of church and storm. I made coffee just to hold something warm. But the only warmth I really felt was in my pocket, the envelope I hadn't opened yet. I turned it over in my hands again and again, tracing the letters of my name. Naomi. Written. In the same heavy strokes my father used when he signed birthday cards back before the world, split into his family and the one he left behind. Thought about not opening it, about burning it even, because some words once read can't be unread. But curiosity is a kind of hunger, and mine had starved for years. So I sat at the kitchen table, the clock ticking like footsteps behind me, and slid it open with the dull edge of a butter knife. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery with the Carter Law emblem pressed into the corner. And beneath it, a small brass key, cold, old, heavy. The letter began in my father's handwriting, neat but trembling. My dearest Naomi, if you are reading this, I am gone, and for that, I am sorry. There are truths I buried because I feared the cost of them. You were that cost, and I have lived with that guilt every day since the morning I walked away from your mother. I paused. My hands trembled. I could hear my heartbeat against the ceramic of the mug. You have been punished for my mistakes, made invisible so that others could live comfortably in their illusions. I cannot undo that, but I can return what was yours to begin with. This key belongs to the house on Waverly Hill. What's inside will explain everything. There was one last line, written smaller, fainter, as if he'd hesitated before finishing. I hope. One day you will forgive me, but if you cannot, I understand. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I sat there, listening to the rain soften, staring at the brass key like it was breathing. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't know. Ms. Carter? A man's voice said. This is Attorney William Harlow. Your father's estate requires your presence this afternoon. 2:00 sharp. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, that Elise's people had found a way to summon me just to humiliate me again. But then he said something that made me sit upright. Your father listed you as a beneficiary. I drove to the law office in silence. The city looked washed out, cars slick with leftover rain, clouds hanging low over the skyline like old grief. When I entered the office, the scent of leather and paper hit me first. Books lined the walls like silent witnesses. The receptionist, a young woman with careful lipstick, gave me the kind of smile people reserve for the unexpected. Conference room C, Ms. Carter. They're waiting for you. They. When I opened the door, Elise was already there. She turned slowly, her pearls catching the light. You got invited? She said, voice sweet as poison. How considerate. I didn't respond. Mr. Harlow gestured for us to sit. His expression was practiced neutrality, the face of a man who had seen too many families devour themselves over paper and ink. He cleared his throat. Your father's final instructions are brief but specific. Both of you are named. Elise blinked, almost laughing. Both? He nodded. Yes, and there's a clause. One I'm obliged to read aloud. The room fell still. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to pause. Decision regarding my estate shall be finalized until Naomi Carter has visited the property on Waverly Hill and confirmed her claim. The words hung there, heavy and deliberate. Elise shifted in her chair. That's ridiculous, she said. She doesn't even... Mr. Harlow raised a hand. It's legally binding, Ms. Carter. The document was notarized last spring. Elise's face cracked. Just a flicker, but I saw it. A flash of panic behind her confidence. I looked down at the brass key in my hand. It caught the light like a small flame. Do you know what's there? Mr. Harlow asked gently. No, I said. But I guess I'm about to find out. When I left the office, Elise followed me into the hallway. Her heels clicked like gunfire. You think this means something? She hissed. You think he chose you now, after everything? I turned to her, calm, steady. "I don't think," I said. "I know." For the first time, she didn't have a reply. Outside, the clouds finally broke, sunlight sliding through in thin, fragile threads. I stood there for a long time, the key still warm in my palm, realizing that for the first time since he died, maybe even before, my father had given me something that was mine alone. And whatever waited on Waverly Hill, I was ready to face it. Waverly Hill sat at the edge of the city, where the asphalt turned to gravel and the streetlights thinned into trees. The drive out there felt longer than it was, every mile stretching like memory. The air smelled like wet cedar and distance. I hadn't been to that part of town since I was a child. My mother used to point toward the hills when we took the bus home from her night shifts. She'd say, "That's where he used to live before he forgot who he was." I never knew what she meant, until now. The key felt heavy in my pocket, pulsing like it remembered its lock. When I finally reached the gate, the metal was rusted but still dignified, the kind that used to open for laughter and garden parties. The letters "Carter Residence" were carved into the stone pillars, chipped but visible. I pushed the gate open, and it moaned like it hadn't been touched in years. The driveway curved up through old oak trees. The house appeared slowly, like a secret coming out of fog. 3 stories tall, windows boarded, but still proud. Vines crawled over the porch railings, reclaiming what money had once built. I stood there for a long time before walking up the steps. The air was thick with the smell of rain-soaked wood and the faint ghost of perfume, something expensive and forgotten. The key slid into the lock easily, like the door had been waiting. When it opened, the first thing I noticed wasn't dust or decay. It was silence, the kind that listens. Inside, everything was covered with white sheets, the furniture, the chandeliers, even the piano by the window. The light fell in soft, broken rays through the boarded slats. I walked carefully, each step echoing in the hollow room. On the mantel was a family photograph, my father, younger, smiling. Beside him, Elise's mother, sharp and elegant. But in the corner of the frame, half cut off, was another woman's hand. My mother's. I touched the edge of the photo. Someone had tried to tear it once. The rip had been glued back together, but the damage was still there, like the family itself. There was a faint creak behind me. For a second, I thought I wasn't alone. Then I realized it was just the house, breathing after years of silence. I walked through the room slowly, following instinct more than logic. In the study, I found a small safe behind a painting. The brass key fit perfectly. Inside were 2 things, a black leather journal and a flash drive in a plastic sleeve. The journal smelled like old ink and regret. My father's handwriting filled every page. Not neat anymore, rushed, emotional, human. I flipped through and stopped at a line that made my stomach twist. Elise's mother found the letters. She made me burn the rest. She said Naomi would ruin everything. God help me, I let her. My hands trembled. My father's guilt was everywhere, in every uneven stroke, in every sentence that tried to confess but never quite did. Then I looked at the flash drive. Small, ordinary. But something about it made my chest tighten. He'd mentioned nothing about it in his letter. I slipped it into my coat pocket, unsure if I was ready to hear whatever it held. Before leaving, I opened the curtains. Dust exploded in the sunlight like a cloud of ghosts. And for a second, I could almost see my mother standing there, smiling through the years of silence, like she'd known this day would come. I walked outside and sat on the porch steps. The sky was clearing, streaks of gold cutting through gray. The letter, the house, the journal, they weren't random. They were a map my father had drawn too late. Behind me, I heard the crunch of gravel, a car pulling up. I turned, Elise's black Mercedes. She stepped out slowly, heels clicking on the wet stone. a thin smile spreading like smoke. "I knew you'd come here," she said. "You never could leave well enough alone." I didn't answer. I just held the journal in one hand, the flash drive in the other, and watched her expression shift. Confusion, then fear. She realized something I already knew. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the one holding the truth. The morning of the inheritance meeting, I dressed like I was going to war. Not in armor, in restraint. A pressed black blouse, hair pinned neatly. No jewelry except the silver watch my mother gave me before she died. Calm, deliberate, unshakable. When I arrived at the law office, the marble floors gleamed like water. I caught my reflection in the glass door, composed, unreadable. The receptionist smiled cautiously when she said, "Conference room A." I thanked her softly, but my voice sounded foreign even to me. Inside, the air felt colder than last time. Elise sat at the head of the table, draped in beige silk, her nails painted the color of wine. 2 board members from Carter Industries flanked her, the company men, all polished smiles and controlled glances. Mr. Harlow, the lawyer, stood near the projector, his files neatly arranged like evidence at a trial. "Naomi," Elise said smoothly, not looking up from her phone. "You made it." "I was invited," she gave a short laugh. "Formality, I'm sure. But do sit down. This shouldn't take long." Mr. Harlow cleared his throat. "Actually, it may take as long as it takes, Miss Carter." He looked at me with something like quiet respect. "Your father's estate is complex, but clear." He opened a leather folder and began reading. Mr. Carter's will divides the estate between his 2 daughters, Naomi Carter and Elise Montgomery. However, a contingency clause requires both beneficiaries to attend this final session before distribution. Elise's hand froze mid-scroll. "Both?" "Yes," Mr. Harlow said. "And as of this moment, both have met the required conditions. Naomi has visited the Waverly property and retrieved the designated items." I didn't move. I could feel Elise's stare burning across the table, but I kept my eyes on the lawyer. "Your father," Mr. Harlow continued, "left specific instructions regarding ownership of Carter Industries and all affiliated assets. I will summarize." He turned a page. "The company's shares, trust accounts, and personal holdings will remain jointly held for a 12-month probationary period. During this time, the board is to evaluate which heir best represents the Carter legacy." Elise laughed, sharp, brittle. "So it's a competition? That's ridiculous." Mr. Harlow's tone didn't shift. "That's the clause. At the end of the term, control passes entirely to one. Your father trusted that character, not charm, would decide." Her smile cracked. I could see it, the twitch at the corner of her mouth. He was ill. He didn't know what he was signing. Mr. Harlow folded his hands. It was witnessed, notarized, and recorded. The silence that followed was almost musical. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the soft scrape of a pen somewhere down the hall. Elise finally turned to me. "You think this is yours to win?" I met her gaze evenly. "I think it's already being decided." She leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You're nothing but his guilt, Naomi. He pitied you. That's all this is. Pity dressed up as fairness." I smiled, not cruelly, just quietly. "Then you shouldn't be worried." Her mouth opened, then closed again. For a moment, the perfect daughter ran out of script. Mr. Harlow handed each of us a folder. Inside were official documents, asset breakdowns, share certificates, a sealed letter labeled "To my daughters." I touched the envelope but didn't open it. The weight of it was enough for now. "Elise," Mr. Harlow said, "you'll maintain temporary control of company operations. Naomi will oversee the Carter Restoration Fund, a philanthropic branch your father established last year." Her voice tightened. "A charity? You're giving her charity?" "No," he said softly. "Your father created it to honor Naomi's mother. He specified that the initial endowment comes directly from his personal accounts, not company assets. It's independent. I felt something bloom quietly inside me, not victory but validation. He hadn't forgotten her name after all. Elise slammed the folder shut. "This is absurd." "Those are your father's wishes," Mr. Harlow said. She rose abruptly. "You'll regret this." Her heels struck the floor like punctuation marks. I waited until the door closed behind her before standing. "Mr. Harlow," I said, "may I ask, why me?" He regarded me for a long moment. "Because he said you listen." "Most people hear, Naomi. You listen." I nodded. "Thank you." Outside, the afternoon light spilled across the lobby, warm, forgiving. I stepped into it slowly, the folder pressed to my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own name. Through the glass, I saw Elise's car speed away, tires hissing against wet pavement. She was already plotting. I could feel it. But this time, I wasn't the quiet shadow behind her story. I was the author now, and the ink was still wet. I used to think silence made people noble, that if you endured long enough, dignity would reward you. But dignity doesn't feed you. It doesn't protect you from lies whispered in your absence. It just teaches you to bleed quietly. That week after the inheritance meeting, Elise vanished from the press. No public statements, no smiling photographs. But her absence made more noise than her presence ever did. The board began calling me Miss Carter, cautious but curious. I answered politely, always with a calm that confused them. They expected fury. I gave them order. Every night I returned to the Waverly house to read my father's journal. The ink had faded in places, but the meaning never did. He wrote about the early days, how he'd fallen in love with my mother, Lillian, a schoolteacher from Baton Rouge. He wrote about laughter over cheap wine, about dreams they couldn't afford but chased anyway. Then came the shift. She said Lillian wasn't right for the company's image, that investors needed to see a certain kind of wife. I told her love didn't care about image. She smiled and said, "That's exactly why love doesn't run empires." The she was Elise's mother, Vivian Montgomery. I had heard her name my whole life, usually in whispers heavy with fear. My mother once described her as the kind of woman who mistook cruelty for elegance. I turned another page. Vivian gave me a choice, the company or the life I built with Lillian. I chose wrong, and when Naomi was born, she made sure I believed it. My fingers tightened around the paper. He'd believed her. He'd chosen the myth of perfection over the truth of family. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. The house seemed to breathe with me, each gust a sigh of history. The next morning, a white envelope slid under my apartment door. No return address, only my name in looping script. Inside was a photo. Elise's, mother standing beside my father at a charity gala, her diamond hand resting on his chest, a smile too practiced to be real. On the back, someone had written in blue ink, "Ask who funded the Wellsworth account," the same account mentioned in my father's letter. I went to the bank that afternoon. The manager, a gray-haired man with the cautious kindness of someone who'd seen too many secrets, scanned his computer, then looked up slowly. "That account's sealed, Ms. Carter. Co-authorization required. One signature missing." "Whose?" He hesitated. "Elise Montgomery." "Of course." I thanked him, then stepped outside into the sunlight, the city humming around me like nothing had changed. But everything had. Somewhere in the layers of my father's empire, money had been hidden, not stolen, not gifted, hidden. The kind of money that doesn't just buy things, it buries truth. That night, I sat with his journal open on my lap, trying to connect the pieces. Every entry painted the same picture, a man who had been rewritten by the woman who replaced us. He wrote less about love and more about control, about image, about debt. His last entry stopped mid-sentence. "Vivian says the board will never accept." Then nothing. I traced the pen mark, imagining his hand trembling as he set it down. Maybe he'd meant to finish it later. Maybe he'd decided silence was safer. I heard my phone buzz. A text from an unknown number. "You're looking in the right place. But you're not the only one." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. A second message followed. "Waverly Hill. Midnight. Bring the key." It could have been a threat, but it felt like an invitation. I thought of Elise, cunning, furious, humiliated. She was the only person who would know about the key. Still, curiosity outweighed fear. Midnight found me driving up the hill again, headlights slicing through mist. The house waited in the darkness, silent but alive. When I stepped onto the porch, the door was slightly open. Inside, the air smelled of rain and perfume. My pulse climbed. "Elise?" I called softly. No answer, only the faint echo of dripping water. Then, from the study, a whisper of movement. I pushed the door open and froze. The safe was open, empty. A single note lay where the journal had been. "You should have stayed quiet." Outside, an engine started. Tires crushed gravel, fading fast into the night. I ran to the porch just in time to see taillights vanish down the road. For a long time, I stood there in the dark, the rain cold against my face, the empty safe behind me like an open wound. The family myth had finally cracked, and beneath it, something uglier was waiting to breathe. The next morning, I woke to the sound of thunder rolling over the city. It wasn't storming yet, but the air had that stillness that comes before something breaks. My mind replayed the night before, the open safe, the missing journal, the sound of Elise's car disappearing down the hill. I brewed coffee I didn't drink and sat at my small kitchen table staring at my phone. No messages, no calls. Just silence thick enough to feel like warning. I knew what the note meant. You should have stayed quiet. Elise wasn't subtle when she was scared. She'd taken the journal because she thought it was my weapon. But she didn't realize the real weapon was the truth that couldn't be contained by paper. By noon, I was back in Mr. Harlow's office. His secretary looked startled when she saw me. "He's with a client, Ms. Carter, but I'll wait." She nodded and offered coffee. I declined. The wait stretched long enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner and the tick of the wall clock. Steady, indifferent. Finally, his door opened. Mr. Harlow looked older than he had last week. "You found the house?" I nodded. "And lost the journal." His eyes sharpened. "Lost?" "Elise has it." He sighed. "Then things will get worse before they get better. I need to know about the Wellsworth account." That got his attention. He closed the office door quietly. "Your father mentioned it?" "In the letter," I said. "And someone else knows." He hesitated. "That account was opened in your mother's name 29 years ago. Your father transferred company dividends there privately. After his second marriage, he tried to access it again, but the co-signature belonged to Vivian Montgomery, Elise's mother. Yes, and when she died 5 years ago, control passed to Elise, but she never closed it. Perhaps she didn't know what it contained, or perhaps she knew too well." "What's in it?" "Enough to rewrite your family's story," he said, "and enough to ruin hers." I felt the ground shift under that sentence. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photocopies of old banking forms, my mother's handwriting beside my father's signature. The ink had faded, but the names still breathed. Lillian Carter, James Carter. "She never touched a cent," Mr. Harlow said softly. "Your mother kept her dignity while everyone else sold theirs." I closed the folder. "Can it be opened now?" "Only if both signatories agree, or if one is proven to have acted fraudulently." "Elise forged my father's consent on other documents, didn't she?" He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes was enough. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the windows like melted glass. I stared at the city below, its skyline fractured by gray. If I can prove fraud, what happens? The funds revert to the rightful heir. And that's me. He nodded. Legally and morally. I stood. Then I'll find proof. Mr. Harlow's voice followed me as I reached the door. Be careful, Naomi. Families destroy faster than they forgive. That night, I returned to my apartment to find the door slightly ajar. My pulse jumped. I stepped inside slowly. Nothing looked stolen, just touched. The curtains moved faintly from the draft. On the counter lay a single flash drive, the one from my father's safe. No note, no explanation. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting a virus, half expecting a ghost. The screen blinked to life, showing one video file labeled, "If you're listening, Naomi." My breath caught. I pressed play. My father's face filled the screen, older, frailer, sitting at his study desk. His voice trembled but carried that familiar mix of command and apology. If you're hearing this, it means Elise found a way to keep you away. She always does. I let her mother build a cage around this family because I mistook obedience for peace. The Wellsworth account was never about money. It was about memory. Your mother helped me create it to preserve what the board wanted erased. Every document, every transfer, every bribe. They're in that account. And if you access it, you'll see what Carter Industries was built on. He coughed, the sound raw. You deserve more than the scraps of my conscience, but I can't change the past. Only you can decide what to do with its proof. The video ended with him looking directly into the camera, lips trembling as if trying to speak again. But it cut to black before the words came. I sat frozen, the rain outside pounding harder. My hands were shaking. Proof of fraud, corruption, deceit, all hidden in an account tied to my mother's name. Elise thought she'd taken everything when she stole the journal. She didn't realize she'd just handed me the reason to finish what he started. I closed the laptop and stared into the dark window. Lightning flared, reflecting my face, steady, unblinking. The myth of our family was collapsing, and beneath the ruins, I could finally see its foundation. Lies, sealed in a bank vault. It was time to open it. 2 days passed before Elise reached out. Her message arrived just after sunset, short and poised like her. Dinner, 8 o'clock. The house. No greeting, no threat. But I could feel both between the words. I almost didn't go. Every part of me whispered trap. But curiosity isn't a weakness. It's a mirror. It shows you who still has power over your peace. So I dressed in quiet armor, black slacks, soft silk blouse, hair slicked back, neutral, unreadable. The mansion looked different at night. Its windows glowed warm, almost inviting. A lie, wrapped in light. The gates opened automatically when my car approached. I parked beneath the porte-cochere where 2 marble lions watched me like judges. Elise met me at the door wearing crimson. She always understood visual dominance. "Naomi," she said, voice velvet over glass. "You came." I said I would. "Good." She stepped aside. "Let's not pretend this is social." The foyer smelled like roses and brandy. Every surface gleamed. A pianist played faintly in another room, recorded, not live. Elise led me to the dining hall, where a long mahogany table stretched between us like a battlefield. Dinner was already served. Lamb, asparagus, wine older than both of us. She motioned for me to sit. I did, folding my napkin carefully, every movement measured. "Nice house," I said. She smiled. "It should be. I've spent my life maintaining it." "That must be exhausting." She tilted her head. "You make it sound like I didn't earn it." I met her gaze. "Did you?" The pause was sharp enough to cut through the soft violin drifting from the speakers. Elise took a slow sip of wine. "You think you're the victim. the poor, forgotten daughter reclaiming her birthright. But let me remind you, our father chose me. He married my mother, not yours. He chose convenience, I said quietly, and spent the rest of his life trying to undo it. Her smile flickered. Don't rewrite history just because guilt suits you. I don't have to. He recorded it himself. The words landed like a glass shattering in another room. She blinked, her composure bending slightly. What are you talking about? I leaned forward. You stole his journal. But not the flash drive. She froze. I continued, soft but certain. He recorded everything, Elise. Every lie, every transfer, every forged signature. The Wellsworth account isn't just money, it's evidence. For the first time since I'd known her, she lost control of her face. The mask cracked. Fear slipped through. You're bluffing. Am I? She laughed too quickly. You think a video changes anything? You're still an outsider. You don't belong in this family, in this house, or in that company. Then why invite me? Her silence answered for her. I stood. Enjoy your dinner. Wait. Her voice broke slightly, the first fracture of something brittle. You don't understand what you're walking into. I understand perfectly. You've been hiding behind his name. Now I'm giving him back his voice. I turned toward the door, but she called after me, tone shifting, pleading under the arrogance. Naomi, please don't destroy what's left of him. I paused. The words hit something tender, but not enough to stop me. You destroyed it the day you told me I had no place at his funeral. When I stepped outside, the night air felt sharper, cleaner. The rain had stopped. The moon was rising behind the clouds like something reborn. I didn't look back. In the car, my hands trembled as I started the engine. The drive down the hill felt endless. My father's face lingered in my mind, the way his voice cracked in that recording when he said my mother's name. Lillian. The sound had been prayer and confession all at once. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. A new message, unknown number. You shouldn't have told her. Another followed seconds later. They're watching you now. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the world narrowing to headlights and fear. But beneath it all, a strange calm rose in me. They could watch. They could whisper. I'd spent a lifetime invisible. Now my existence was finally inconvenient. When I reached my apartment, I locked the door and closed every curtain. On the table, the flash drive still waited, small and unassuming. I slid it into my laptop again, this time copying the contents to 3 encrypted drives. One went into a safety deposit box, one into the cloud, one I mailed to Mr. Harlow with a note that read, "If anything happens to me, release everything." Outside, thunder finally broke. Rain hammered the windows, fierce and wild. I sat in the glow of the screen, watching the storm move across the skyline. Elise thought dinner would intimidate me. Instead, she'd confirmed her guilt. Her fear was the first real proof I needed. The next phase wouldn't be about confrontation. It would be about exposure, quietly, legally, irrevocably, the same way truth always wins. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. I didn't sleep that night. The storm rattled my windows until dawn, thunder echoing like the world was tearing open. When morning came, the sky was gray and swollen, but inside me something had gone still, the kind of calm that comes when fear burns itself out. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and opened the flash drive again. The video was still there, but I hadn't noticed before. There were 2 files. The second one was labeled For Elise. My pulse kicked. I hesitated. Maybe it wasn't mine to watch. But then I remembered the note she left in the safe. You should have stayed quiet. She'd stolen his words. I owed it to him to reclaim them. I pressed play. The screen flickered, then steadied. My father sat at the same desk as before, but this time his posture was different, straighter, colder. He wasn't a man confessing. He was a man recording evidence. His voice carried no tremor. "Elise," he began, "you've always believed power makes you invincible. But you forget power is borrowed, not owned. I gave you my name, my trust, my company. and you used them as currency for deceit. The Wellsworth account holds the proof. You and your mother forged documents, moved funds, and called it strategy. I called it betrayal. He paused, breathing shallowly. Naomi will find this. I made sure of it. If she does, understand this. What happens next is not revenge. It's restoration. She deserves to see what truth looks like when it stops apologizing. My breath caught. He looked straight into the lens, eyes tired but steady. I spent my life worshipping reputation. Now I see that legacy without honesty is just inheritance without soul. He coughed, wiped his mouth with a handkerchief, and whispered, I hope you forgive me, Elise. But I know you won't. Then he reached forward, turned the camera slightly, and I saw something behind him I hadn't noticed in the first recording. A locked cabinet labeled Records, 1992-2003, the video cut to static. I sat back, my chest tightening. The cabinet. That had to be the missing piece. If the documents inside matched the transfers in the Wellsworth account, it would prove everything, not just fraud, but intent. I called Mr. Harlow immediately. The recording mentions a cabinet. At the Waverly House. He sounded alert, cautious. Then you'll need to recover it before she does. I'm going now. Naomi, listen to me. But I'd already hung up. The drive to Waverly Hill felt shorter this time, like the road was pulling me toward the truth. The house stood waiting, gray against the morning fog. I unlocked the door, heart hammering. The air smelled of dust and something metallic, maybe rain seeping through the pipes. The study looked undisturbed, but the cabinet was there, half hidden behind a row of shelves. The key from my father's envelope didn't fit, but a small drawer beside the desk held another. Old brass, labeled "Are It Turned Easily." The door creaked open to reveal folders stacked in neat rows. Inside, receipts, contracts, bank authorizations, all marked with the Carter Industries seal. And at the bottom, 2 signed affidavits. One in my father's handwriting, one forged under his name. I scanned the signature. My stomach turned. Elise's handwriting, disguised but familiar. I took photos of everything, my hands shaking. Then I heard it, footsteps on the porch. I froze. The floorboards creaked, then silence. Elise? I called no answer. Just the wind, then the faint sound of gravel crunching, a car door closing, an engine starting. She'd been here, maybe watching, maybe realizing she was too late. I exhaled shakily and gathered the papers into a folder. Before leaving, I looked around the room one last time. My father's study felt smaller now, almost gentle. The weight of his absence had shifted. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was permission. Outside, the fog was lifting. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. Another message from that same unknown number. You opened it. Good. Now finish it. No name. No clue, but whoever it was, they wanted this truth freed as much as I did. I drove straight to Mr. Harlow's office. When he saw the folder, his eyes widened. My God. He kept everything. Enough to prove forgery? He nodded slowly. Enough to dismantle the entire facade. I set the folder on his desk. Then do it. File it publicly. He hesitated. Once this goes through, there's no undoing it. The media will swarm. Elise will come for you. She already has. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You sound like your mother. That night, I sat by my window watching the rain return. Soft, rhythmic, relentless. The kind that cleans without mercy. For years, I'd thought of my father as a coward. Now I saw him as something else. A man who finally told the truth, even if it destroyed everything he built. And in the silence between thunderclaps, I whispered, I forgive you. Outside, lightning flashed, bright enough to turn the sky white. For the first time, I didn't flinch. The truth was awake now, and it had my voice. The morning after the recording, the city felt sharper. People hurried under umbrellas, horns echoed through wet streets, and everything smelled like metal and rain. But inside me, something had quieted. Fear had burned away, leaving focus. I'd spent my life surviving lies. Now I was ready to weaponize truth. I made a list. Names, dates, accounts, and connections. Everything from my father's files and recordings. For the first time, the puzzle had edges. Elise's forged signatures linked to her mother's offshore trusts. Company shares funneled into shell corporations. Every detail whispered premeditation. Mr. Harlow wanted to move carefully. "A case like this requires discretion," he said. "Discretion," I replied, "is how she's kept power this long." He sighed. "Then what are you proposing?" "A plan," I said. "One that ends quietly but echoes forever." That night, I drove to the Waverly house again, not to dig, but to think. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and clean. I sat in the study where my father recorded his confessions. The cabinet stood open, empty now except for the faint outline where folders once rested. A scar of truth. I thought of my mother, teaching me to read by candlelight when the power was cut, telling me, "Knowledge doesn't scream. It waits." She was right. My revenge wouldn't come from shouting. It would come from precision. The plan began with the Wellsworth account. I transferred copies of every forged document to a secure drive. Then I created a new entity, the Carter Restoration Fund, using my rightful share of inheritance as capital. On paper, it was charity. In reality, it was reclamation. The fund's mission: transparency, women's financial literacy, restorative grants. The irony wasn't lost on me. The empire built on deceit would now fund truth. Mr. Harlow helped file the paperwork. The board didn't question it. Philanthropy softened reputations. Within a week, the foundation had a name, a logo, and a quiet presence online. Elise didn't see it coming. She was too busy managing damage control after whispers of forgery began circling through the company. I didn't start those whispers, but I didn't silence them either. The next step was exposure. I sent anonymous packages to 3 journalists known for integrity, each envelope containing a copy of the video, select financial statements, and a note. Ask who profited most from silence. No return address, no signature. Just evidence. By the end of the week, headlines began surfacing. Corporate heiress under investigation. Hidden accounts, hidden betrayal. Elise's face appeared on every financial blog, her practiced smile replaced with something raw. Disbelief. She called me once. I let it ring. Then again. I answered on the 3rd call. "What have you done?" Her voice cracked between rage and fear. "I told the truth," I said simply. "You'll destroy everything." "Maybe," I said, "but not my mother's name." She exhaled sharply. "You think this makes you righteous? It makes you alone." "I've been alone my whole life," I replied. "The difference is now I'm not ashamed of it." Silence. Then she whispered, "You sound just like him." Before I could respond, the line went dead. That night, I drove through the city until dawn. The skyline shimmered against the river like broken glass trying to reflect light. I thought about my father's last words. Legacy without honesty is just inheritance without soul. He'd built a kingdom on silence. I was burning that kingdom down, but maybe that was the only way to free him from it. Days later, Mr. Harlow called. "It's begun," he said. "The board's convening. They've suspended Elise pending investigation." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. "And the account?" "Frozen until full audit. Once the fraud's verified, the funds revert to your mother's estate. Her estate. Not her shame. Not her erasure. Her name restored." When I hung up, I sat in my car outside the courthouse, watching rain slide down the windshield. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. I remembered Elise at the funeral whispering, "You have no place here." Maybe she was right then, but she was wrong now. My place wasn't in their home, their company, or their myth. My place was in the truth, steady, unyielding mine. The plan was nearly complete. Only one thing remained: to make the truth permanent, public, untouchable. I opened my laptop, drafted a statement for the Carter Restoration Fund website, and wrote the final words of my reclamation. Every empire built on silence eventually learns that the quiet ones remember everything. When I hit publish, the page went live, a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. Outside, the first light of morning broke through the clouds, pale and clean. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and whispered, "It's done." For the first time in my life, my name didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. The invitation came from Elise herself. A gilded envelope, embossed with the Carter crest, delivered by courier. Inside, one line written in her looping hand. "Join us for Father's Memorial Gala. Let's show the world we're still family." I almost laughed. Still family. The words tasted like irony. But I knew why she wanted me there. Optics. The investigation had bruised her image, and she needed to parade forgiveness before the press. A united front to soften suspicion, so I accepted. The gala was held in the grand atrium downtown. Glass ceilings, gold fixtures, a string quartet drowning in champagne chatter. Cameras flashed at every arrival. The scent of wealth was everywhere. Jasmine perfume, old money, and freshly polished gilt. When I entered, heads turned. Some smiled politely, others whispered. I walked slowly, letting their curiosity wash over me like cold water. Elise stood near the podium in a silver gown, radiant but fragile, her confidence stitched together with denial. "Naomi," she greeted, voice sugar over venom. "You look lovely." "So do you," I said, holding up well under pressure. A flicker of anger crossed her eyes. "Don't confuse headlines with truth." "I don't," I said. "I expose both." Before she could respond, Mr. Harlow approached. "Ladies, the program begins shortly. Naomi, your name's been added to the speakers list." I blinked. "Mine?" Elise thought it fitting, he said carefully. She smiled, all teeth. "A chance for closure." I nodded slowly. "Closure, of course." As the orchestra softened, the crowd gathered near the stage. Elise took the microphone first, her tone smooth, rehearsed. She spoke about legacy, about her father's unyielding devotion to family. The audience nodded, cameras flashed, champagne sparkled. But I watched her hands. They trembled just enough to betray the truth. Then she gestured toward me. "And now my sister Naomi will read a letter our father left behind. A testament to his love for both of us." Applause. Lights dimmed slightly. The world slowed. I walked to the podium, clutching the envelope marked "To my daughters." My pulse thundered, but my face was calm. The crowd waited. Elise smiled, expecting a gentle eulogy. Instead, I opened the letter and unfolded not my father's words, but the transcript of his recording. I began to read. "Elise, you've always believed power makes you invincible." The room fell still. Forks froze midair. The music stopped entirely. My voice didn't tremble. It grew stronger with each word. "But power is borrowed, not owned. You forged my name, took what was never yours, and built your future on deceit." Gasps. A murmur rippled through the guests. I looked up briefly. Elise's face had drained of color, her smile collapsing. "Naomi will find this. What happens next is not revenge. It's restoration." I finished the last line slowly, each syllable heavy as truth itself. Then I folded the paper and placed it on the podium. "Those were his words," I said. "Not mine." Silence. "The kind that splits rooms in half." Elise tried to speak, but her voice broke. "That's not— He was sick. He didn't—" Mr. Harlow stepped forward, his tone firm. "The document is verified. The investigation's findings align with it." Reporters surged forward. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Elise stumbled back, eyes darting from face to face, searching for rescue in a crowd already judging. I turned to leave, but stopped beside her. "You wanted a family portrait," I whispered. "Now you have one, truth and all." Then I walked off the stage. Outside, the night air was electric with whispers. Journalists clustered near the doors, their voices rising in disbelief. Fraud, forgery, betrayal. Every word peeled another layer from her image. I stood beneath the marble archway, the city lights gleaming against wet pavement. Somewhere inside, the orchestra began again, playing to an audience too stunned to listen. Mr. Harlow joined me quietly. "You understand what you've done?" "Yes," I said. "I ended the myth," he nodded. "She'll fight back, I know. But the truth doesn't negotiate." As I stepped into my car, I looked once more at the building. Gold lights, glass walls, a monument to vanity. For years, I'd dreamed of being seen in those halls. Now I realized visibility was nothing without integrity. When I drove away, I saw Elise through the glass, surrounded, cornered, silent for once. The storm had passed, but she was just beginning to drown, and for the first time I didn't feel vengeance. I felt freedom. The morning after the gala, the world woke up with my sister's name in its mouth. Headlines bled across every screen: heiress exposed in family scandal, Carter legacy under fire. Every network replayed my father's confession like scripture. His voice, steady, weary, final, played between cuts of Elise's stunned silence. I watched it all from my kitchen, barefoot, coffee going cold in my hand. Reporters camped outside my building before sunrise. When I opened my blinds, flashbulbs burst against the glass like fireworks. The world had finally seen the truth, but exposure carries a strange kind of loneliness. You don't celebrate it, you endure it. My phone never stopped vibrating. Journalists, board members, distant relatives pretending concern. The only message that mattered came from Mr. Harlow. Board votes today. Be ready. At noon, I walked through the revolving doors of Carter Industries. The same building where I'd once been escorted out during shareholder meetings now echoed with silence when I entered. Assistants lowered their eyes. Whispers followed me like wind through tall grass. The conference room was full. Board members lined the table, faces taut with calculation. Elise sat at the far end, hair pulled back, a picture of restraint. She wore black this time, not silver. The transformation was deliberate, mourning instead of majesty. Mr. Harlow cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss the future of Carter Industries following the public release of James Carter's confession and subsequent evidence." A gray-haired man from the board spoke first. "The shareholders demand stability. The scandal has shaken investor confidence." Another woman added, "We can't rebuild trust with Elise under investigation." Elise's voice cut through the murmurs. "I made mistakes, but I built this company while others watched. You'll destroy everything my father created if you hand control to her." Her eyes found mine. The air between us thinned. I didn't speak until the room fell quiet. "He didn't build this company on loyalty," I said. "He built it on silence. And you perfected that silence until it became profitable. But the truth doesn't bankrupt legacy, it redeems it." A pause. Someone exhaled. The chairman finally said, "The vote stands. Effective immediately, Naomi Carter will assume interim leadership pending resolution." The gavel fell. The sound was softer than I expected, but final. Elise didn't move. When the meeting adjourned, she caught me in the hallway. Her perfume, jasmine and steel, hit before her words. "You think you've won?" she said quietly. "No," I replied. "I think I've survived." She stepped closer. "You'll regret this. You don't know the weight that comes with power." "I carried that weight when you called me unwanted," I said. "This is lighter." Her expression wavered. "You sound like him." "I learned from both of you," I said and walked away. Outside, reporters swarmed like birds. Microphones thrust forward, questions fired rapid as rain. "Are you taking over? Did your father's confession shock you? What happens to your sister now?" I didn't answer any of them. I simply said, "The truth belongs to everyone," and kept walking. That evening, my office window reflected the city lights like a sea of restless stars. The building felt foreign, too large, too quiet. But beneath the fear, a strange peace hummed. The Carter name no longer frightened me. It felt like something I could rebuild instead of run from. But victory has echoes. The threats began 3 days later. Anonymous calls, letters slipped under my door, one envelope containing a single photo, my apartment building, taken from across the street. No signature, no words. Mr. Harlow urged security. You exposed powerful people, Naomi. Some won't forgive it. I'm not afraid, I said. It wasn't entirely true, but fear and purpose sound similar in the dark. Still, the board held. The public rallied. Donations to the Carter Restoration Fund multiplied overnight. Messages poured in from women who saw themselves in my story. Quiet daughters, silenced wives, the unseen. They called me the Quiet Heir. The nickname spread online, soft and unstoppable. It wasn't about wealth. It was about endurance. One night, scrolling through messages, I found one unsigned but simple. He'd be proud. Keep going. For a moment, I believed it was from my father. Or maybe it was the world answering back. Days turned to weeks. Elise's name disappeared from the headlines. She retreated into silence, the same silence she once weaponized. The empire she guarded now stood under my hand, not as inheritance, but as responsibility. And for the first time since the funeral, I visited his grave. The rain had stopped. The grass glistened under weak sunlight. I laid a single white lily on the stone and whispered, "You were wrong about legacy. It isn't what we leave behind. It's who refuses to stay buried with us." The wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of rain and soil. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, the silence felt like peace instead of punishment. The backlash had burned through everything false, leaving only truth, and I could finally breathe in its clean, unmerciful air. It was late afternoon when she came. The sky hung low, pale and tired, the kind of light that makes even sharp things look soft. I'd just finished a meeting when my receptionist's voice cracked over the intercom. "Ms. Carter, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." I knew before she said the name, Elise Montgomery. I told her to send her in. When Elise stepped through the door, I almost didn't recognize her. The woman who once wore diamonds like armor now stood in a simple gray coat, no makeup, her hair unstyled. Her eyes, once practiced in charm, were dull as storm water. She looked smaller, human. "Naomi," she said, barely audible. "Elise." I gestured toward the chair across from me. "You know, people usually call first." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "You'd have hung up." "Probably." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The office hummed with quiet, the distant rhythm of printers, footsteps in the hall, the sound of the world moving around two women who had spent their lives circling each other like planets with opposing gravity. "I saw the news," she said finally. "The foundation. You've done well. It's not about doing well. It's about doing right." She nodded, staring at her hands. "Do you ever stop rehearsing morality? Does it ever exhaust you?" "It used to," I said. But then I stopped explaining it. Her gaze lifted, sharp again for a second. "You think you're clean in all this? You exposed me to ruin. You destroyed my reputation." "I didn't destroy it," I said quietly. "You built it on sand." Elise's jaw tightened. "I lost everything." "You still have your freedom," I said. "You should be grateful for that," she flinched. "You think I don't feel guilt?" "Guilt isn't the same as change." Something broke in her face. She stood and walked toward the window, her reflection ghosted in the glass. "I used to dream about being seen," she said. "Now I can't walk down the street without whispers." "You got what you wanted, Naomi. Are you happy?" I looked at her, really looked. The arrogance was gone, but the emptiness remained. The woman who once measured power and control now looked like someone measuring air to breathe. "No," I said softly. "I didn't want you ruined. I wanted you honest." She turned, eyes wet but defiant. "And what are you now? The saint of exposure?" "No," I said. "Just the daughter who finally stopped apologizing for existing." Elise sat again, her posture collapsing like a tent without its poles. For a long time she stared at the floor, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small black box. "I found this in Father's things," she said. "It's yours." Inside was a locket, silver, worn, delicate. Inside the frame, my father and my mother, smiling on their wedding day. Before money, before lies, I touched the photo. My throat tightened. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I'm done holding ghosts," she said. "And maybe it's time you held something real." We sat in silence for what felt like an entire season. There were no apologies, no tears, just the quiet hum of two people staring into the aftermath of a war no one had truly won. Finally, Elise stood. "I'm leaving the country," she said. "Someplace quiet, somewhere no one knows the name Carter. I hope you find peace," I said. She hesitated at the door. "Do you think he'd forgive me?" I met her eyes. "I think forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, but maybe he'd want you to try." She nodded slowly, then walked out. The door clicked shut, a soft sound, but final. For a long time I stayed still, watching her silhouette fade through the frosted glass. The city outside glowed in late sunlight, the horizon gold and gray at once. I opened the locket again, tracing my mother's smile with my thumb. It felt fragile, sacred, like something rescued from a fire. Then I placed it on my desk, next to the Foundation's mission statement. Truth heals when it's faced, not buried. The clock ticked quietly. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed. Life, stubborn as ever, went on. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled, and whispered to no one. We're finally free. Outside, the light shifted, warm and endless. The kind of light that forgives. 6 months later, the city felt different. Lighter, faster, almost forgiving. The rain that used to haunt my windows had turned to morning light, spilling gold across the skyline. I'd learned to measure time not in grief or revenge, but in progress. Quiet, measurable progress. The Carter Restoration Fund had become more than an organization. It was a movement. Every day, letters arrived from women whose names no one had bothered to remember. Sisters, mothers, daughters, women erased by inheritance and pride. Some sent photos, some sent nothing but gratitude. They called us the house built from ashes. I liked that. Our office sat in what used to be one of my father's warehouses, renovated, open, full of plants and laughter. Where there had once been dust and debt, there were now voices telling stories into microphones for our oral history project. On one wall hung a portrait of my mother, Lillian Carter, her eyes calm, fearless. Beside it, my father's journal rested under glass, open to the line that began it all. If you're hearing this, it means the truth has found you. I kept his words visible not for sentiment, but as reminder, truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to stand long enough to be seen. Reporters still wrote about the scandal occasionally, but the tone had changed. Now they called it the Carter Redemption. They said I'd turned disgrace into legacy. But I didn't care for redemption stories. They make forgiveness sound clean. It isn't. Forgiveness is a bruise that teaches you where you once broke. Elise hadn't contacted me again. Rumors said she was living in Lisbon under another name. I didn't check. I'd stopped needing her acknowledgement. Some wounds close not with apology, but with distance. One afternoon, while reviewing grant applications, I received an envelope, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a single note written in looping script I hadn't seen in months. I visited him today. The flowers were from both of us. I smiled, small and private. Maybe that was her apology, a shared peace offering to the dead. I placed the note inside the locket she'd given me and let it rest against my heart. At sunset, the team gathered in the courtyard for the Foundation's first anniversary. The air smelled of jasmine and warm brick. A jazz trio played softly under string lights. People toasted to survival, to truth, to new beginnings. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching faces illuminated by laughter, and realized how far the silence had carried me. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped onto the small stage, the microphone humming beneath my fingertips. "A year ago," I began, "my family name was a wound. Now it's a lesson. We don't choose the stories we're born into, but we can choose the ones we leave behind. This foundation isn't built on revenge. It's built on recovery, the quiet kind that grows after the fire burns out." Applause rippled through the courtyard. I looked up at the stars, faint but present, like promises learning to keep themselves. After the event, when everyone had gone, I walked alone through the empty halls. The sound of my heels echoed against concrete floors polished clean. On my desk, a single lamp glowed beside a framed photo of my mother. I whispered, "We did it, Mama," and turned off the light. Outside, the night air was warm, carrying the faint hum of the city, taxis, laughter, a life still unfolding. I passed a newsstand. The headline caught my eye. Naomi Carter's foundation expands nationwide. I smiled, not out of pride, but peace. The story was no longer about what was taken from me. It was about what I chose to build anyway. When I reached my car, I paused, glancing up at the skyline. Somewhere behind all that glass and steel, my father's memory lingered. Not haunting, just watching. I could almost hear his voice. Build what they can't, and I had. As I drove home, the city lights blurred like gold tears, but they weren't for grief. They were for closure, the rare kind that feels earned. The road stretched ahead, open and endless, and for the first time in years, I didn't look back. The foundation stood where the silence once lived. And I finally understood what legacy meant. Not power, not money, but truth that refuses to die quietly. It was spring when I returned to the cemetery. The wind carried the scent of lilac and fresh earth. The world had thawed, and so had I. A year had passed since the truth burned its way through everything I thought I knew. A year since my father's voice turned confession into clarity. The sky stretched open above me, soft blue brushed with clouds. I walked the narrow path between gravestones until I reached his. The marble had weathered to a gentler white. Someone, Elise maybe, had left new flowers. White roses this time. I knelt, tracing his name with my fingertips. James Carter, 1959-2024, dates that contained both empire and apology. I pulled the letter from my coat pocket, the one I'd carried through every storm and board meeting. The edges were worn now, folded so many times the creases had become part of the words. I'd read it hundreds of times, yet somehow it still spoke differently each time I did. But there was one thing I'd never noticed until last week. Under the signature, faint and slanted, almost invisible beneath the paper's texture, a line written in lighter ink, P.S. Don't fight for what they stole. Build what they can't, the last line. Hidden, almost like he wanted it to be found only when I was ready. I smiled. The kind of smile that comes when pain finally learns to sit quietly beside you instead of devouring you. Don't fight for what they stole, I whispered. Build what they can't. I looked around, the hills, the budding trees, the sunlight filtering through branches. That line wasn't an instruction. It was permission. Permission to stop defining myself by what had been taken and start living by what I'd created. The Carter Restoration Fund had grown beyond anything I imagined. We'd launched housing programs, education grants, legal aid for women silenced by inheritance disputes. We'd opened offices in 3 cities. Every week another story reached us, different names, same wounds. And every story stitched a new piece of healing into the world. But standing there, I realized none of it had truly been about redemption. It was about legacy, the kind my mother lived and my father finally tried to understand. The kind built quietly, without spectacle, on work that lasts. The breeze lifted strands of my hair. I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs, heavy with spring. I forgive you, I said. The words didn't taste bitter. They tasted clean. I placed the letter on the grave, pressing it beneath the roses. The paper fluttered slightly before settling, like it too was ready to rest. I hope you can rest now too, I murmured. I've finished what you started. As I stood, a shadow moved at the edge of the path. Elise. She wore a simple black dress, no makeup, her hands clutching a small candle. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. She knelt beside the grave, lit the candle, and placed it beside the flowers. For a moment, our reflections flickered together in the flame. 2 halves of a broken name, finally still, she whispered, barely audible. Goodbye, Father. Then she turned to me. Her eyes were softer than I remembered. You kept your promise, she said. So did you, I replied. She nodded once, then walked away. Her figure disappeared behind the trees, leaving only the sound of wind and the faint crackle of the candle's flame. I stayed until the light began to fade. The world turned golden, then blue. Somewhere church bells echoed faintly across the hills. I thought of the girl I used to be. The one who stood at the funeral. Silenced, invisible, told she had no place here. Now, she did. Before leaving, I whispered one last thing. You were wrong, Elise. I always had a place. I just had to build it myself. The wind rose, scattering petals across the grass. I turned toward the path, the horizon burning with the last light of day. Each step away from that grave felt like closing a chapter written in another lifetime. When I reached the car, I looked back once. The candle still burned, small but defiant, refusing to go out. A symbol of everything I'd learned, that truth once lit doesn't vanish, it transforms. I started the engine. The road curved downhill, winding toward the city that now carried my name without shame. Billboards flashed headlines about the foundation's expansion. The radio played softly, a song about homecoming, and in that moment, I understood what peace really was. Not silence, not victory, continuance. The quiet persistence of life refusing to stop. By the time I reached the city limits, night had settled. Lights shimmered across the river like scattered promises. I rolled down the window, letting the wind touch my face. I thought of my father's last line again, the ink faint but eternal. Build what they can't. I smiled. I did. Then I drove on, into the lights, into the noise, into a future finally my own.